So today's board gaming vlog, we're going to ask the question, we're going to explore and build that checklist. What makes for a good dungeon crawler board game? Now, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know the titles in my collection, they slant very heavily. They lean very heavily towards dungeon crawlers. Part of this is, of course, the influence of Dungeons and Dragons in my life, but also the fact that a lot of dungeon crawlers make use of miniatures, being a wargamer. And I like the idea of sitting down with some friends, rolling some dice, going into a dungeon, and having that experience in a compact board game format. That said, there is a lot of competition out there, especially now where it seems like a new dungeon crawler is coming out every month, whether it's kickstarted or retail, jumping in more than ever. And this is true overall, the board gaming hobby. I think the days of blind buying are really, really over. Meaning you want to take and look and say, my collection's going to grow. I'm going to have multiple titles in the same kind of wheelhouse, whether it's dungeon crawlers or simulation type games or competitive type games, world building type games. This game, whatever it's going to be, this title I'm going to add, is it going to get played? You know, is this something that I'm going to play regularly, or is it just going to sit on my shelf and taunt me? And there are many, many good games out there. We want to avoid the bad games, and there's no reason to settle for a bad game, given all the titles. Now, what constitutes a bad game? I think building a checklist and understanding what are the things you want to get out of a system, or in this case, a dungeon crawler, that's going to be the checklist. And I'm going to offer some of my points that I look towards, that I enjoy, that I want to experience and cultivate. And then, of course, we'll turn it over into the comments. And if you have any titles that you think are worth looking at, both as recommendations for myself, I'm always open to new dungeon crawlers, but also so that others, as they discover this video, they can get some ideas of what to check out. So I definitely want to encourage that, and I would appreciate those recommendations. So the first thing, putting aside the visuals, the whole idea of playing with miniatures and how the tiles look, they have to look good. They have to look up to current production standards, but that's very much a personal taste. And I won't say that it has ever turned me off of a dungeon crawler. I know the type of artwork and miniature style that I would prefer, but it's kind of consistent. It's just understood like premium tiles, premium cardstock, decent dice, decent miniatures, just standard. Second would be the rules. Now, the rules are important because they are a simulation. I don't need the rules to be perfect. I don't necessarily need the rules to be super tight and efficient like Gloomhaven. I love Gloomy. I appreciate that. And boy, am I impressed by the rules. But I'm okay if things get a little wonky or if they're not as tight as they should be, as long as they do a good job of the narrative. That said, there are some board games like the Dungeons & Dragons Adventure series, which the rules, they kind of punish you at certain points. And I have a couple of those titles in my collection. I enjoy them, but the rules really they could have been worked on a little bit differently. And we're not going to move into that. I mentioned these 2 points because somewhat decent rules and quality of components, that's just a given before we even jump into any aspects of the playstyle. That's just an assumption. So the first thing that's important to me, is there a sense of discovery? Is there a sense of the unknown? And this could be in playing an Overlord type model where I'm a player with a party with my friends and we're going against an overlord controlling the dungeon, or it could be a co-op type game. I want this idea of tension. I want things to kind of ramp up. I want to start getting nervous in a good way as we play. I want excitement. This is one of the reasons why, while it's not a dungeon crawler, I love Zombicide Invader. I love Massive Darkness. I love Zombicide Black Plague. You start out on the board, things spawn, you got things under control. Now all of a sudden another thing spawns, a boss spawns here, and very, very quickly you're like, look, we're getting overwhelmed. Tactically, we got to do something. I like the idea of dungeon crawlers where even if it's a revealed map, you kick open the door and things spawn. unknown things spawn. I want to be surprised. I want to be surprised in the point of I don't necessarily know what's happening next. I think that unknown is the heart of a dungeon crawler. I'm going into a dungeon. Yeah, I know the mission. Yeah, I got the backstory from the bard at the pub. But who really knows what we're going to encounter? Different play styles of classes are important because not only do they give you team building, but in terms of replayability, I find the biggest way, a lot of people seem to be focused on missions for replayability or quests. Yes, that's important. I don't want to get a dungeon crawler with like 5 quests, but do I need one? I mean, I love Gloomhaven. I'll take all the quests, but do I need one with hundreds and hundreds of quests? That's nice, but the real replayability is the different character classes, combining them instead of 4 going in with 1, if it's 2 going in with 4. And I like enough diversity in terms of character class and ability that they all play very, very unique, as opposed to like, well, here's a fighter, and it's a fighter stat. Here's a class we will call a barbarian, which just has some slightly less hit points, but hits a little bit harder. Is that really a difference? I can make up that difference by rolling better on the dice or being a little smarter tactically and not taking a hit. I want things very, very different. And I'm okay with playing different experimental or non-classic character classes. But I think that is important. The loot, the treasure. This is important. This could tie into leveling up. I want a sense of progress in a dungeon crawler. I want my character to evolve and become more powerful. There's a couple of ways to do this. The classic Descent, first edition, second edition system is very much outside of campaign play. We'll put aside campaign for a second. You get more powerful by obtaining magic items as you go, as you quest. So I understand that, and that's the easiest way to implement a rule set. There are games where you could level up either in between quests or as the adventure goes. I think a great example of this, Massive Darkness, where you have a character class, but then you have skill trees. And literally as you thump on monsters and kill them, you get experience, and then you spend that to go in different trees and select different abilities. So both work, but I think that is important. And then the final thing for me, I want a boss fight. Bonus points if it's a dragon. I love fighting dragons. But I want to play in a session. It could be a short session. It could be a longer session. I want to play where we're going in, we're exploring, we're getting some loot, we're leveling up, and now winner takes all boss type fight. And maybe it's an easy boss in the lower missions. Maybe it's a mega boss, harder boss in the higher missions. But I want that feeling of, wow, we did it. And I'm ready to lose. Dark Souls hits a lot for me as a dungeon crawler. And some of the fights you'll play 3 or 4 hours real time in and then die. Well, you died and get good, go back. I can accept that, but some players are like, winner takes all. If I lose this game, I'm going to be very upset. I want to kind of auto win, or I want a chance where to do it over, power surge or resurrect or go back to the spawn point. Not right or wrong, depends on your preference. Those are my preferences. Now, what I didn't include, it's nice. I mean, look, this video would be really short and just like, what do I want in a dungeon crawler? Everything. My checklist of important things. If I have these additional things, yeah, that's great, and that adds more weight. A campaign system. I appreciate a campaign system. I prefer games that have missions that you can play through, so I'm not tied to a campaign system, either getting together with my friends to play, or playing solo, or a one-off at the gaming club or gaming store. Sometimes I feel like campaign play, even when it's well done, now we're getting into like, setup and tracking. It's almost like a role-playing type game. And if it's done well, yes, absolutely, fantastic, and more value bolted on. But the campaign play isn't a necessity for me. I would much prefer a random dungeon generator, even if it's not perfect, even if it has some kind of quirks to it, over campaign play. But I understand more and more, especially as time is at a premium for all of us, having a campaign play in a dungeon crawler means for the times that you can't get together with your D&D group or your RPG group, you can still get that feeling. You can still understand that perspective through a campaign. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Building that checklist, if we're looking at dungeon crawlers, what is make or break? What is important? And again, very much appreciated. You've got some good titles. You've got something that you've played through and you're like, Fritz, this is something to look at. Post it. I would love to see it. And I will definitely follow up on those recommendations because a number of titles in my collection that I enjoy have come through recommendations on my channel and other channels. So it's a very, very important and appreciated aspect of the community.